The Constitution will be saved as prophesied by Joseph Smith. It will be saved by the righteous citizens of this nation who love and cherish freedom. It will be saved by enlightened members of this church.
This is where it gets real for us.
People have forgotten how much of a threat that was. Hundreds of millions of people have died.
God is going to take care of us. The government is never going to take care of you. We have to take care of our government, and God will take care of us.
Hey, what's up, everybody? Just wanted to welcome y'all back to an episode of Zion's Camp podcast. We had the devil attacking us, trying to stop us from making videos. Just like literally after we got together, like everybody just got attacked in their own way. It's kind of funny how Satan works like that because he doesn't want the work to go forth. But it doesn't matter. We're here. We got the fire of the Lord. So got me, Latter Day Crusader here, and Trey Kelly here, and we're going to talk today about a very important topic that often just gets swept under the rug by many Latter Day Saints. We want to talk today about the United States Constitution, um, and the reason that we want to is there's a few quotes that we should understand and things we should understand about our prophet Joseph Smith. And so Joseph Smith said, "The Constitution of the United States is a glorious standard. It is founded in the wisdom of God. It is a heavenly banner. It is to all those who are privileged with the sweets of liberty, like the cooling shades and refreshing waters of a great rock in a thirsty and weary land. It is like a great tree under whose branches men from every clime can be shielded from the burning rays of the sun." What are your thoughts on that, Trey?
I love that quote. Like the Constitution is very important, not only to our country but to our religion. It's one of those things that I've said before that that politics and religion really is inseparable, and people try to separate those things. Like I agree with separation of church and state, but for your personal beliefs, you have to believe in the politics of your country and being able to have that way to govern and take care of your people. It reminds me of another great quote by Joseph Smith. He says, "I am the greatest advocate of the Constitution of the United States there is on the earth. In my feelings, I am always ready to die for the protection of the weak and oppressed in their just rights. The only fault I find with the Constitution is it is not broad enough to cover the whole ground." And so there we have Joseph Smith saying that he's the greatest defender of the Constitution. He loved the Constitution and he fought to protect it. He even ran for president on the grounds of trying to protect and preserve the Constitution. That's how important it is that we're talking about right now. He
Mhm.
was
And
actually
I think,
murdered. Yeah, he was actually murdered during his presidential campaign because a lot of people really disagreed with his politics because he was like staunchly trying to follow the Constitution, give rights to all human beings. He wanted to end slavery. This is what we're up against here when it comes to people are attacking the Constitution since the days of Joe Smith, and it's only gotten worse since then.
and it's something that many members of the church don't understand. They haven't been taught this, and they don't understand the role that we are supposed to play as Latter Day Saints. Without our prophets have said, um, Ezra Taft Benson had said that and many other prophets as well, that without the Constitution of the United States, it would have been impossible for the restoration of the church. And so the Constitution, we could compare it, as well as the Declaration of Independence, to the title of liberty, that Captain Moroni has in the Book of Mormon. Because what did Captain Moroni do? He kneeled down and he made a covenant with God. And so when you read the Declaration of Independence, it's actually a document that is founded. What does it say, right? It talks about the supreme creator, and it talks about how all men are created equal. And so because of that, we understand that these men, it wasn't just something that was simply based only in the philosophy of men. These men who they made an actual covenant with God, and with that they were going to fight for their freedom, and that they would not back down to government because God had made them free. And they understood this because 50 out of 55 of the men who signed the Constitution, right? Who some of the founders were attending Christian churches. In fact, and if you look at some of the well, it's not in our Constitution. If you look at the state constitutions of the time, they required you to be part of some church, and so as to be in public office, as part of being a moral person. I believe it was 9 out of 13. I could be wrong on that, so don't quote me. But many of their state constitutions required that at the time. And so I think it's important that we understand that and the implications it has as for us as Latter day Saints.
Right, exactly. And Dallin H. Oaks just recently, a couple of years ago, gave a talk in General Conference titled Our Divinely Inspired Constitution. And so it's actually called Defending Our Divinely Inspired Constitution. And so the church leaders, although, like you said, many members are starting to like forget this principle of how important politics is in general, but not just politics, but especially defending the U.S. Constitution specifically. But many leaders of our church, especially Dallin H. Oaks, are trying to make sure that we don't forget this principle. It's still as relevant today as it was during times of Joseph Smith, during the times of Ezra Taft Benson. In fact, one quote that he said near the end of his talk, I really like. He said, "Our belief in divine inspiration gives Latter-day Saints a unique responsibility to uphold and defend the United States Constitution and principles of constitutionalism wherever we live. We should trust in the Lord and be positive about this nation's future." And so he even added in there that we should uphold principles of the Constitution wherever we live. So there's many members of the church. Most members of the church actually live outside the United States, and they still need to be looking to the U.S. Constitution and trying to uphold those types of principles in their countries as well. That's because this is going to affect the entire world, being able to uphold the Constitution of the United States.
Exactly. And in that talk by Dallin H. Oaks, by President Oaks, he talks about how many of the other constitutions, in fact, most of them all around the world, were based around principles that are found within the Constitution of the United States. Right. And he says that those nations should look to the Constitution as to ways that they can govern. And if we go to Doctrine and Covenants, I think this is something so important. This is the Lord speaking here. This is not like it's coming from us, right? This is the Lord. He wants us to understand this. In section 101 of the Doctrine and Covenants, he said that every man may act in doctrine and principle pertaining to futurity according to moral agency which I have given unto him, that every man may be accountable for his own sins in the day of judgment. Therefore, it is not right that any man should be in bondage one to another. And for this purpose have I established the constitution of this land by the hands of wise men whom I raised up unto this very purpose, and redeemed the land by the shedding of blood. And so God wants us to be free, right? That's what he's saying here. Christ wants us to be free. It's not right that any man should be in bondage. That's why he established the Constitution. And the Constitution had to grow and it had to mature, right? And that's how we ended up eventually, freeing the slaves. That's what Joseph Smith, that was one of the things he was trying to do. And one of the reasons, like you said, Trey, that people didn't like his politics and they feared the power that he was attaining to, because he wanted to end slavery, because he wanted to uphold the Constitution. And the powerful men at the time, they didn't like that. And as Latter-day Saints, we should understand that at any moment we can lose our liberty if we're not fighting for it, just as the saints of old times did, right? I mean, this is not we shouldn't be pacifists about this. Joseph Smith, when the mob came in to Liberty Jail, did he just take that? No, he pulled out a pistol and he shot back at the mob that was trying to kill him, right? He was defending himself. So did Hiram. They went out like men. They said that they would absolutely seek for peace, and war was the last thing they ever wanted, right? And they were peaceful men. They just wanted to be left alone. But they were also willing to stand up and fight for their rights, even if that came down to bloodshed. And that is something that, as Latter-day Saints, that we should also be willing to do.
So that perfectly brings us into the next thing that we want to talk about. So Joseph Smith and also many prophets after him have re-prophesied the same thing that Joseph Smith prophesied. Including Ezra Taft Benson talked about this a lot. And let me pull this up real quick. It says, Joseph Smith said, "The time will come when the country and the Constitution will be in danger of an overthrow. And if the Constitution be saved at all, it will be by the elders of the church." And so this same prophecy has been reiterated by other prophets too. They've talked about the fact that the Constitution is going to hang by a thread, and the United States will be close to destruction, and that the elders and the members of this church are going to play a pivotal role in helping to save the country, save the Constitution.
Yeah,
And
in fact, President Benson said, kind of expounding on what Joseph Smith said in October 1987 General Conference, in a talk titled Our Divine Constitution, he said, "I have faith that the Constitution will be saved as prophesied by Joseph Smith. It will be saved by the righteous citizens of this nation who love and cherish freedom. It will be saved by enlightened members of this church, among others, men and women who understand and abide the principles of the Constitution." So it's going to be saved by the enlightened members of our church as well as righteous citizens around the nation. But if we don't act upon what the prophets have told us, the Lord is going to hold each and every one of us accountable, right?
Yeah, that's exactly right. And another point, just to reiterate how much of this has been prophesied. Did you get a chance to listen to that devotional I sent you a few weeks ago?
I didn't listen to all. I didn't get a chance to listen to all of it, but
Okay,
just
no, I
the
got you.
gang.
But there's this one part where it talks about. I talked to you a little about it in our chat. That
Yeah,
it talks about the Native Americans, like the ancient Americans that live here anciently. They had many different prophecies in their legends. They have the prophecies of, or they have like their stories. They're handed down stories that they have, like talking about the great peacemaker that came and taught them many things. And we know that we have a record of this in the Book of Mormon. But one of the things that is lesser known is they actually had this story handed down that was this prophecy that the great peacemaker or Jesus Christ taught them. That said that in the last days, um, there was going to be great wars, and that there was going to be that they talked about the eagle to represent what we would know as the United States. They talked about like the bear that we can assume would symbolize Russia, and it had another symbol to represent the people to represent the government of China. And so basically, what it talked about was that this exact same concept that the eagle or the United States in the last days was going to be almost destroyed and almost killed by these other enemies, and that the good brothers from the West were going to come and save the eagle. And it actually gave some very specific ways how they were going to identify these good brothers of the West, which actually has a lot to do with like specifically our church in general, and especially the things that like part of our temple and our temple rituals, and that would be kind of an identifier for them of who these people were that were going to save the Constitution or save the eagle, you know. And so that's just like, doubling down, tripling down on this prophecy that like this is for real, that the Constitution is in danger, and we, especially as members of the church, have a huge responsibility to step up to the plate and come and defend it and save it. But my question to you is, like, how do we go about that? How like what all can we do to actually fulfill this prophecy?
that's a question, right? That we're all trying to
Mm-hmm.
find the answer to. I think right now is we look around and what do we see? They've tried to assassinate the man who will likely be go on to become our next president, maybe not, um, President Donald Trump. Um, and they have been and they got this close. They were this close. And that could have led to who knows what that could have led to civil war, whatever, riots around the country, just absolute chaos. And so we can see the signs of the times around us. And I think we have to ask, and that is the question that I think each member of the church needs to ask themselves. And what I've been asking myself, what can I do? And so for me, I think it all starts with, actually reading the Constitution of the United States, understanding, what are our rights, what is the proper role of government, as well, and getting involved at a local level. This year, I actually helped out with a campaign for U.S. Senate for Trent Staggs. So Mitt Romney's not going to run again here in Utah, and so that seat's been up, and we were trying to get uh, Trent Staggs elected. He's very grassroots, believes in the divinely inspired U.S. Constitution. So I got to see that process and how it works on like a local level. And what I found out was a lot of it just comes down to the money. John Curtis, he got more votes, even though the better candidate by far, who actually follows more closely, is more closely aligned with our beliefs as Latter Day Saints, Trent Staggs. Even though we had this amazing grassroots campaign where so many people got involved, we just got outspent. They spent like $5 million, and just from the ads and the lies and propaganda, the people in Utah, they voted more for John Curtis probably because they saw something on TV or they heard his name before, or his name was the first one they saw that had an R by it. And so I think the biggest thing we can do is understand the Constitution, understand our role as citizens, and then try to do the small, simple things like getting involved in a campaign or finding little different things. I think it will be different for everyone, right? And we all have to seek personal revelation where that's concerned.
Yeah, that's a great point. Like we have to get involved in any way we can, and that can feel kind of daunting and hard. Like you said, like there's big money at play here. There's big, powerful people. It's kind of hard. Like, what can just some random person actually do to help out with this? But there's a lot you can do in that sense, and even trying to get involved in political office yourself, and possibly becoming a politician, even at the smallest level, to just automatically start pushing those good principles from the bottom up if you have to. And I think another thing is really being able to identify the problem and identify what is actually what we are defending against. So we have
Yeah.
the
What would you
Constitution.
say are some of those things that like we as Latter Day Saints should be defending against?
So
Some of those
you and I
problems.
know, yeah, you and I know that the Book of Mormon, like one of the greatest things the Book of Mormon does is actually lay that out for us. Mormon and Moroni, the last writers and compilers of the Book of Mormon, they literally talk about how they saw our day. They knew what was coming for the future of the Gentiles that would come to the land of America. And they knew that they were going to be afflicted with the same troubles as they were. And so they tried to, lay it out for us exactly how the Nephites were destroyed and the Jaredites were destroyed, that was going to be how the Gentiles were going to get destroyed in the last days if they didn't awaken to their awful situation. And there's actually a wonderful chapter in the Book of Mormon that I was just reading today, Ether chapter 8. Would you like to go over this a little bit? Just kind of, we can read a few verses from it and talk about it.
Absolutely. Let's kind of jump into maybe before we do that. I actually have a little quote because I think this is pertinent to kind of right. The Book of Mormon warns us, like you said, about different things that led to the downfall, and some of those things were, I would say, pride, sexual immorality, and the philosophies of men. And if we read, there's a quote. So one of our prophets, President Joseph F. Smith, said, "There are at least three dangers that threaten the church within, and the authorities need to awaken to the fact that the people should be warned unceasingly against them. As I see these, their flattery of prominent men in the world, false educational ideas, and sexual impurity. But the third subject mentioned, personal purity, is perhaps of greater importance than either of the other two." And so this is kind of something that he talked about in the modern day is what would threaten the church, right? False educational ideas, philosophies of men, and sexual impurity. And so we kind of see that same pattern in the Book of Mormon, right? And if you look around at our country, as we've disobeyed the commandments of God, things have gotten increasingly worse. So I don't know if you want to start in Ether with that in mind.
Yeah, for sure. And so I don't want to read like every verse, but like just to start off,
Kind of
it started
explain
off.
it, yeah.
Yeah, I'll go through a little bit of it. So to start off, it talks about um, there was a man named Jared. He rebelled against, his father was the king, right? And Jared rebelled against his father. They went into wars. He ended up bringing his father into captivity, and then his father's had some sons and daughters, and they became angry because of the captivity and what Jared, their brother, had done to them and to their father, and so they actually were able to bring up an army, and they were able to defeat Jared, and then Jared was pleading with them for his life, and it says, "And now Jared became exceedingly sorrowful because of the loss of his kingdom." So yeah, he gave up his kingdom because they were about to kill him, so he surrendered everything. He said, "For he had set his heart upon the kingdom and upon the glory of the world." Now the daughter of Jared, being exceedingly expert and seeing the sorrows of her father, thought to devise a plan whereby she could redeem the kingdom of her father. And now the daughter of Jared was exceedingly fair, and it came to pass that she did talk with her father, and said unto him, "Whereby hath my father so much sorrow? Hath he not read the record which our fathers brought across the great deep? Behold, is there not an account concerning them of old, that by their secret plans did obtain kingdoms and great glory?" And so what she's saying to her father, Jared's daughter, is saying, like, "Dad, don't be sad. Don't you know that we have those ancient records that talk about these secret plans of how to obtain kingdoms and glory?" And she devises this plan where she is going to basically go and um, tempt Achish, who is the son of Kimnor, and she's going to go tempt him, and so that he will want her to be his wife, and then they were going to, but she was only going to be his wife if Achish, would bring the head of the father of Jared to Jared. And so we see that this crazy plan start to begin with this daughter sexually tempting, just like Crusader was just talking about. Sexual immorality, sexual impurity is one of these things that we have to cleanse. So the very first thing that happens here is there's this sexual temptation to where she's going to tempt this man to want her so badly that he will go and bring the head of Jared's father in order to have her. And that is when everything starts to go downhill from there, because later on the plan does work, and then it says, "And they were kept up by the power of the devil to administer these oaths unto the people, to keep them in darkness, and to help such as sought power to gain power, and to murder, and to plunder, and to lie, and to commit all manner of wickedness and whoredoms." And so what happened with that is they started to implement those ancient secret plans that they had in those records of how to gain glory and how to gain kingdoms, these dark secret combinations.
And in
And
verse 18 it says,
yeah.
and it came to pass that they formed a secret combination, even as they of old. This
Mm-hmm.
combination is most abominable and wicked above all in the sight of God. So this is one of the worst things, right? I mean, they literally commit the worst sins and form this secret organization to gain power and money and all the things of the world. Starting first with the temptation of sexual morality we talked about, which led to murder, and then that murder led to them taking away agency from other people
Mm-hmm.
by gaining power over other people. And man, I gotta say, like this is I just kind of had this thought, and this might be too much for some people, but if you look at what's going on right now with this election, do you know how Kamala Harris became so powerful? She was the little side piece of some dudes, and she worked her way up to through. And look, dude, whatever, people can do what they're gonna do. We have free agency, but it's very similar to this story of how Kamala Harris got into power by
Yeah,
basically,
that's a striking parallel. I had
yeah.
not actually thought about that before.
Yep, and then
um,
look where she is now. And so the point of this, right? Maybe you don't believe that that happened, whatever. But the point is, this is a pattern that repeats itself. And like you said, this is the Book of Mormon is about our day. It's not. Yes, it's a historical record and a prophetical record, but it's to warn us of what we're seeing. And so that's the point. Is this is happening right now? These combinations have been formed. They're being formed. They're at work. That's why we just saw our president today. I just saw there was another assassination attempt. Um, and the fact that we're even seeing that in America is sad, and it shows how bad things truly are. I mean, if you didn't wake up when COVID, when they told you that you couldn't go and worship in your house, right, or at the church, excuse me, but you could go in California, you could go to the dispensaries and buy as much weed and get as high as you wanted, right? But you couldn't go to church, right? They shut us down. They told us we couldn't go to church, and people obeyed, and they willingly just masked up and did what everyone told them to do. Willingly took a bunch of these, right? Without even thinking. And so the Book of Mormon is trying to awaken us to what's happening so that we can be aware and preserve our freedom, so that we have the freedoms to worship, so that we can raise our children righteously, so that we can follow Jesus Christ.
right, and that's what we're talking about here, and that's this story of these secret combinations being implemented into the people of the Jaredites. This isn't just a story from 3,000 years ago. This is what Moroni says later on in the chapter. This is where it gets real for us. He says, um, they have caused the destruction of this people of whom I'm now speaking, the Jaredites, and also the destruction of the people of Nephi, which was Moroni's people. And whatsoever nation shall uphold such secret combinations to get power and gain until they shall spread over the nation, behold, they shall be destroyed. For the Lord will not suffer that the blood of his saints, which shall be shed by them, shall always cry unto him from the ground for vengeance upon them, and yet he avenged them not. Then it starts talking to us specifically. Moroni says to us, wherefore, O ye Gentiles, it is wisdom in God that these things should be shown unto you, that thereby ye may repent of your sins, and suffer not that these murderous combinations shall get above you, which are built up to get power and gain. And the work, yea, even the work of destruction come upon you. Yea, even the sword of the justice of the eternal God shall fall upon you, to your overthrow and destruction, if ye shall suffer these things to be. Wherefore the Lord commandeth you when ye shall see these things come among you, that ye shall awake to a sense of your awful situation. And that's what we're seeing right now. I think a lot of us are awakening to our awful situation. We're realizing, like, oh my gosh, everything that the Book of Mormon talked about, these secret combinations, these secret murders and plans to get more power, it's happening. And it's happening right here in the United States. It's threatening our Constitution. And so, like, and a lot of people are starting to wake up to this. A lot of people are starting to see this and starting to question a lot of the things that's happening in the government. The Book of Mormon talks about these murders and secret oaths to get greater gain, and a lot of people think that wouldn't happen. The government wouldn't do stuff like that. People in the government wouldn't do that. But a lot of people are starting to realize, just like that one video says, it's kind of a meme. Like, if you think the government wouldn't do something, like, oh yes, they would. And a lot of people are actually starting to see that. Crusaders gave a couple examples, like some of the shenanigans that happened during COVID. How Kamala Harris rose to power, and I mean, when you looked at the campaign with Hillary Clinton, there was so much shady stuff there, like with Benghazi and stuff like that, where it's like, this is actual evil, dark stuff that's happening, murders, people dying, and these people are gaining a lot of power and money and riches from it. And there's so much, and it really goes so deep, and it's hard to even sift out exactly what you're looking at. But that's the point: is that these things are there, and we need to be able to see them, or else we're not going to be able to defend the Constitution. That's why Moroni was trying so hard to get us to see it. That's why he was trying to lay it out for us in the Book of Mormon.
Mm-hmm.
What
You
are
know,
your thoughts, Crusader?
I mean, he witnessed, and I mean, just imagine you're Moroni for a second, okay? Your whole life you're in battle and you're fighting on two fronts. You're fighting on a spiritual front because you're to try to help your people repent, and you're actually fighting so that you don't get killed by the Lamanites, this other group of people. So these prophets, they lived an extreme life, and they were shown great things by the Lord of, and they basically got to understand. We only have this little tiny amount of their history, right? There's so many more records that someday we will have more, but now we only have this much. But Mormon and Moroni had access to everything, and they saw the patterns that led to you know different downfalls at different times in their society. And I think, like you said, it's important that we recognize it so that we can actually do something about it. Another thing I'm going to point out that I would recommend all of you is looking into. I served my mission in McAllen, Texas, by the border of Mexico, and so I got to see what it was like down there, and I got to see the transition from one president to the next. I lived in Laredo, Texas, and man, it's crazy down there in Laredo. You got Nuevo Laredo on the other side, and I lived about, we would just walk to the Rio Grande. It was like 5 minutes from our apartment when I lived in Laredo. And I remember the first night I got there, just hearing gunshots out there in Nuevo Laredo. Anyways, the point of all this is when we had the president switch from Trump to Biden, what I saw was that just the amount of crossing across the border just skyrocketed. And they stopped building the wall. They stopped building fortifications. We always should compare everything to the scriptures, right? What did Captain Moroni did? He built fortifications. What do they do now? They're trying to take them down. They're bringing, right? And so what I have learned as well recently about, sadly, the situation down there, and one of the secret combinations that's going on right now, is that the government is funding all of this illegal immigration that's happening. And I have many friends who are I've made many friends who are illegal immigrants, and as well as I know members of the church, and some of those people are some of the kindest, most best people I've ever met in my life. Better than me, better, more Christian heart than me. But at the same time, unfortunately, that has also allowed the real criminals to come into our country. This administration had just said that they allowed 425,000 people into the country who have a criminal record. 15,000 of them being convicted of homicide murders, 13,000 rapists, with another 19,000 with homicide charges. So they're actively aiding and abetting the criminal cartels in Mexico, and it's all being funded by us, the U.S. taxpayers. And the federal government is simply facilitating this, right? And they're also involved with the trafficking of children. And there's a documentary by James O'Keefe called "Line in the Sand" that I recommend you all watch. That I'm going to go watch, and he documents all of this. And so these secret combinations are at work, and we need to be aware because this is a sad situation that's going on in our country, right? And if we don't wake up to what's happening, then our country is going to be destroyed, and we're seeing that. What are some of your thoughts on that, Trey?
Yeah,
With
you're
everything
totally
that's
right.
going on.
Yeah, you're totally right. Like the whole thing with illegal immigration, obviously there's some type of agenda there with the left, and it obviously, you know, I do like what you said about, that you have many friends who came here illegally, they're immigrants, and that, are great people, and I totally agree. I have tons of friends, people that I love that came here legally, and I think most people that are against illegal immigration would agree that, like, you know, the majority of the people that are coming here are good, and I'm happy for them to come here. I love these people, and they're hard workers, and they're great people, and I love for them to come here. But the problem is, there has to be something done about this crisis of criminals coming over and doing insane things. And, the drugs trafficking, the sex trafficking, it's completely evil, and it's evil that the government is letting that happen. So there's got to be something to be done about that. And just overall, it's just one of those things that you're talking about. Just one of these secret combinations. There's so much more. There's so much more at stake. These things that are trying to take down the Constitution, and it's hard to even know, like, where to start, like how to go about trying to root these secret combinations out, these dark acts of our government. How to root these things out. There's so much, and it's everywhere, and is even frankly dangerous to try to fight against in many cases. And that's I think why it comes down to being so important to focus on protecting the Constitution, because the Constitution is the greatest political document that exists. It was inspired by God, and if it were to be upheld and implemented in the way that it is supposed to be implemented, we wouldn't have these problems. That's why we have the Constitution, to be able to keep these problems away. That's why we have the form of government we have with checks and balances, a way to keep people from gaining too much power, to keep the federal government from gaining too much power, to keep a good free market, to go against communism. Communism is probably by far the greatest threat in the terms of these secret combinations, in terms of what the Book of Mormon calls the great and abominable church that seeks to destroy the Church of God and destroy all nations of the world. I believe communism and Marxism is one of, if not the greatest threat when it comes to that.
Mhm. And
And so we have
yeah,
we have
President
to be able
Benson.
to
Go
focus
ahead.
on the sorry, we have to focus on the Constitution. If the Constitution is implemented the right way, then everything else, all the other evils in the world, they're going to be able to be kept at bay.
Mhm.
Go ahead.
Yeah, exactly. And the reason, like you said, it is the document that, if followed, will solve the problems that we're facing. Unfortunately, we have, as a nation, we have gone away from what the Constitution says, right? And we have done things such as implement a bunch of social welfare programs, which were never supposed to be part of it, and just giving more and more money to the government. And kind of what you were saying with socialism and communism, people have forgotten how much of a threat that was. Hundreds of millions of people have died as a result of this evil, satanic philosophy, which is rooted in Karl Marx, uh, who was anti. Karl Marx was antichrist. His goal was to destroy capitalism and to destroy God and dethrone God. And his father said at times it was almost as if he was possessed by demons. His father was a Jewish man who converted to Christianity. And Karl Marx would go into churches and make fun, and sit in the back pew with his professor and laugh and make fun of people following Christ. So it's all. And if we look at it today, what happened in the 1960s was a cultural revolution where Marxism was implemented. And this is something I think that most people don't understand, is how much that has changed and affected our society in the last 60 years. And that's what President Benson was trying to warn people about. That's what he was trying to tell them. And now we see come full circle how that has changed things, how that, you know, how it, Marxism helped to implement atheism, to get rid of God out of society. Part of communism, socialism, and Marxism is to destroy the family unit. And if you look, um, like I believe it was third or fourth wave feminism was active to see it. Um, the CIA actually used it in order to break up the family. Abortion, same thing. It was designed to break up the family. And so these things are the combinations that we have to look out for, and we have to realize how they've been affected. The ideas of Marxism are what, basically Marxism puts government over God, and there is no God. It's just government, and your government becomes your God. President Benson said that is basically the plan Satan had in the pre-Earth life. And so that's the earthly image of Satan's plan: is communism, socialism, Marxism, all of it. And so we need to be able to recognize it when we see it and not be afraid to call it what it is. The wonderful thing is that God called prophets like Ezra Tappens and like David O. McKay, Spencer W. Kimball, and many others who actually talked very much about this. And I think what we have going on right now is we have simply, as Latter-day Saints, forgotten the threat that it is. And we need to wake up as the elders and go, this is the moment that was prophesied of by Joseph Smith, that we need to rise up and we have to put off our chains of sexual immorality, pornography, whatever it is, drugs, alcohol, whatever it is that's holding you back. You've got to let it go, repent, come back to Christ, and then do your duty.
I love that you said that, because that really well transitions into basically what we want to close with, is this idea that Captain Moroni, whenever he was leading his people in battle, his first priority was always cleanse the inner vessel. Cleanse the inner vessel of his people. If his people weren't right, if they weren't doing what they should, if they weren't righteous, they didn't have a chance in going up against their enemies. But if they could get themselves right first, they could get their own government right first, then they could do all the things that they need to do to prepare against the Lamanites, to be able to go to war and defend their liberties, their rights, and their religion and their families. And so that's just what we want to basically invite to anybody listening to this podcast. Is there's so much that we can get caught up in the weeds of exactly all this dark stuff going on around us, but first things first, we have to focus on ourselves. We have to cleanse our inner vessel. Just like Crusader was talking about, we've got to get rid of sexual immorality. That's what started the secret combinations of the Jaredites. We've got to get ourselves right with God. We've got to follow Jesus Christ. He's going to take care of us. I saw this video the other day where this guy was interviewing some guy on the street about what he thinks about this or that with the government, and the guy said, I don't care. The government's going to take care of us. The government's going to do things right. And I was just like, no, like God is going to take care of us. The government's never going to take care of you. We have to take care of our government, and God will take care of us. And so that's just the first thing. Cleanse the inner vessel, get yourself right with God, and He's going to take care of you. And then you can start focusing on moving out to start to fix the problems around you.
Exactly, and that is how ultimately we're going to save the Constitution and fulfill the words of Joseph Smith, of President Ezra Taft Benson, and all the other prophets, is by first cleansing the inner vessel. And the tools that we have to do that are the Book of Mormon, the scriptures, the ordinances of the gospel, really the milk of the gospel. And then once we have done that, then we can get to the meat of saving the Constitution, getting out there and making a difference in the world. But we first must cleanse the inner vessel. As I started on kind of this journey, learning all about all this stuff, that was man, that was the first thing that happened to me. Like I got convicted hard. I got convicted because I was like, why the freak aren't our leaders like saying like they're not doing anything? Like why aren't they like saying more? And then I was like, and then the spirit just started working on me, just kind of hit me like about everything I was doing and how I realized like, oh, when we learn something about the gospel, that's for us. It's not for everybody else, right? God is revealing a mystery to you, and now it's your responsibility. You can't go blaming on the leaders. Dude, our apostles are amazing. They give all of their entire time and existence to all of us to try to teach all of us. The problem is we don't have the it's listening ears, and we don't do what we're supposed to do. And so we need to cleanse the inner vessel, and that's our hope to invite all of you to do. Start by cleansing the inner vessel. Read the Book of Mormon daily. We want to invite you. If you don't do that, do that. Read it every single day. Pray every single day. And the last thing we want to invite you to do as well is to read this. Read the Constitution of the United States of America and the Declaration of Independence. Read this every single day. Just study a little bit, get a copy, or look it up for free online, and just read a little bit and make it part of what you do so that you can recognize the principles that the Lord established through those wise men. Those wise men, the founding fathers, they appeared to Wilford Woodruff in the St. George Temple, asking that their work would be done. And I think that's significant because it shows us that, because I believe the Lord was trying to teach us that what those men did and established was important and it was based in Christianity. And I know that's true. I know that these things are true. I know if we do them, if we read these things, if we cleanse the inner vessel, we can save the Constitution. And I share that in Christ's name. Amen.
Amen. Perfect. So cleanse yourself, cleanse your inner vessel, get yourself right with God, read the scriptures, pray, start reading the Constitution, and then let's get to business. Let's wake up. Let's wake other people up and start to get out there and actually save the U.S. Constitution from destruction that is obviously on the horizon. Well, thank you everybody so much for watching and listening today. We hope you took something out of it, and we'll see you next time.
Till next time.